I still want to make something.
Good evening, we'll go ahead and get started for the town council, meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday, September 9th. We have all councilors, with the exception of Councilor Burns and Councilor West in attendance. We'll go ahead and start by the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a nice welcome back to everybody. After I hope everyone had a nice summer and a good welcome to the school season. So we'll start with I know we do have at least one person in the audience. If you'd like to come up to the podium and introduce yourself. Yes, please.
I was had a question months ago that I was told I needed to be here tonight to talk about it, so that's why I'm here. I live on Upper Narrows Pond.
State your name.
That's right, Andrew Blanchard. I live on Upper Narrows Pond in Winthrop. And for decades, we've a lot of the people who live there, residences, have dealt with engine brake noise near the veterinary hospital area, and also as far as Carwick, with both those businesses. It's kind of a valley there, and you can hear brake noise day and night, and it's something we've all talked about but did nothing about. Eventually, I saw a engine brakes prohibited sign in East Winthrop, across from the Welcome to Winthrop sign, the one that has the loon on it, far from the Winthrop Minerals Drive. Well, it's not that anymore, but it used to be that. So I thought, why not two more signs, one the one coming into Winthrop, maybe near Carwick, one near the veterinary hospital going to Augusta. It's a very common thing in a lot of towns. So I didn't know how I could get something like this accomplished. The one that's in East Winthrop, I don't know if it even does any good. It's not even it's in a level spot. So I didn't even know that could be replaced, it could be moved to the right spot. So that's it.
Yeah, so this gentleman called me a few weeks ago, and what I explained to him is that we can't simply put up a sign prohibiting that sort of activity without there being some sort of ordinance in place that prohibits the activity that we could then enforce. So in our traffic ordinance, there are, I believe, 3 designated spots where these sort of air brakes are prohibited between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. And so I asked him to come here and make his case to you. If you are interested in our potentially amending the ordinance in order to add this location, then we can do that. But otherwise, we can't just put up a sign without there being the force of some sort of codification behind it.
Is that even is that within our jurisdiction? It's on DOT?
It is. I did check with the DOT, and they said that was completely within our purview to have those sort of restrictions. Well, our police chief is here, but I would say that it's probably pretty difficult to enforce, simply because you're going to have someone who's going to complain, and then they would have to report that. And by then, of course, the truck is long gone. So mainly it's one of those instances where if you have something on the books, then you're hoping that you'll get compliance from 95% or better of the people that.
Correct.
You said when apparently you dated yourself by the way, compliment shop and contract status. So so we have it in place, which section of the road now?
Okay, yeah, so I know two of them are along Route 202. Jim, I sent an email to you guys about
Both them.
there you go.
Okay.
I don't see any problem with
I
that.
from you.
Yeah, I think that would be.
All right. Well, I tell you what, if you'll call me tomorrow, we will particular location for potential. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment for this evening? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to item 132. Recognition of John Bussell, his 40 years of service as a Winthrop emergency dispatcher. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Chief Furlan for a couple of words.
We just had a brief get together down at Windsor PD for dispatcher Bussell, to honor his 40 years of service. He started in September 8th of 1984. September 7th. Okay. What I'm remembering, September 8th, of 2014, he was acknowledged by this council for his 30 years of service. Now we're on to his 40, and he promises he's not gonna get 50. Well, have John stand up. Just. John at Windsor PD was known as our crap magnet because everything seemed to happen on shifts when John was working. And he got plaques specifically, idolizing that. You're going again? Well, John is, been reliable over the years. He's been our reserve dispatcher, like he said, he did work for us, full time for a short period while we were trying to find, another full-time employee. He's always there when we call, when we need him, and he's never let us down. I mean, he did years and years as a firefighter in Augusta. Guy from there, we worked for the state of Maine Forestry Service, dispatching to them for 10 years. And came back to us after that, working again as a reserve dispatcher, minimum of 8 hours every week or so. But then whenever we called him in, he was always there to help us out. And I just wanted to recognize his 40 years and the fabulous job he's done for us, and just thank him publicly for that. Thank you.
And John, I also wanted to thank you. Years of service, I was fortunate enough to have, I've been on the other side of the radio many times, and it was always a pleasure to know that you were there. So, thank you very much.
It was very refreshing having John on. Not only did he draw a lot of complaints, and it seemed like I said, he seemed to be a bang into it. But it was always good having him on because he knew what to do, and there was no second guessing. Before you asked for something, it was already done, and that's just comes with years of experience. That's gonna be difficult to replace.
We retired 8 years ago, but he was twisted my arm. And I feel it ever since. Pleasure to be here. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, right now, our presenting Mr. Bussell with a certificate and a thank you.
Oh, okay.
Certificate signed from all.
Just gonna rather
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You won't be calling. He was on our
That's right.
record rotation.
I'll squeeze in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. That's what the 40 in there again.
What? Thank you very much, Mr. Boswell, for your dedication to this town.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 133, the appointment of Finance Director Nicholas School, order 2024-04.
So our attorney has suggested that a best practice is when we have directors that they should be appointed by the council. And as you folks know, our new finance director, Nicholas Poole, started about a month or so ago. And he's been doing great work. So Nick, why don't you come up to the podium and just introduce yourself to folks who haven't mentioned, offer a few words about yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nicholas Poole, or Nick Poole, just call me Nick. As he said, I started full time August 5th. I met some of you already, some of you have, I'm sure, as time progresses. I worked at Belgrade for 9 years. I started at the train station and worked my way up to the treasurer over there, and he pointed out this opportunity, and we're very grateful to be here. For this appointment, because
Well, thank you and welcome.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'll just read order 2024-04, whereas various appointments of directors are necessary, be it ordered by the town council of the town of Winthrop to appoint the following directors for a term expiration of 12/31/2024 as follows. Finance Director Nicholas Poole, adopted September 9th, 2024.
So moved.
All right, is there a second? All right, all in favor? All in favor, thank you. Moving on to item 134, discussion with town attorney Phil Saucier on the tax increment financing districts and options for extending them. Do we have Phil on Zoom?
Yeah, so Phil is here on Zoom. Phil, you want to? There we go.
Hello.
And I believe, Phil, I made it so that you can share your screen.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Should I go ahead and share it now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, do you see this presentation?
Yes, we do.
Great. Well, good. I'll dive right in. Thanks for having me again. I'm Phil Saucier from Bernstein Shore, and Anthony's asked me to give just a brief tax increment financing 101, which I find to be helpful when a town is thinking about adopting a TIF, amending a TIF, just thinking about what you have for current TIFs. You have one TIF. I'll talk about it in a little bit, but I'm just going to go through this. It's fairly brief, and then I'll take any questions as we go along. So the first question, this is just the agenda. I'm going to go over what a development district is, the types of TIF districts, how TIF revenues can be spent, the tax shift benefit that's associated with a TIF, and then finally, a brief review of the town's TIF district. So what is a TIF district? Or a lot of you have probably heard of them, and some of you have dealt with them before. But the way I like to think about it is a TIF is essentially, it's an economic development tool. And in fact, in my view, it's one of the only economic development tools authorized by the legislature for municipalities to incentivize development and or benefit from new development in your community and spend it on various approved projects. It allows the municipality to capture new assessed value that is invested. It's a specific geographic boundary, and I'll get into those sort of limits in a moment. You have to have a development program saying what you're going to do with it, the purpose of that TIF district, and how you would like to spend those funds. There's a concept called original assessed value. And again, this is very brief. I'm going to go into a little more detail. And what that means is at the time you adopt a TIF district in a certain period of time, you have a value, an assessed value associated with that, and you're going to freeze that in place. That's called the original assessed value of that district. So think about a raw piece of land, but you know a company's coming in and about to put some sort of facility there. Obviously, the value will increase. you're going to capture that increased value. A TIF district is adopted by the legislative body, so in your case, the town council, but it also has to be approved by a state agency. And for economic development TIFs, that's DECD. There's a TIF office there, but the commissioner would ultimately approve it, or the Maine State Housing Authority for a type of TIF district that's called an affordable housing TIF. The potential benefits of a TIF district are that they can achieve economic development goals in your comprehensive plan, other visioning documents, town policy. You can attract new investment jobs to your local economy. You can accomplish significant infrastructure projects, meaning if you have, for example, ideas of certain roads or sidewalks or other kind of infrastructure that's made necessary by a potential development coming to town, you can use those TIF revenues to target those investments. And then really importantly, there is a significant tax shift benefit associated with adopting a TIF. How does that work? This slide shows you a little bit what it means when I say capturing value. So you'll see along the bottom a 30-year time frame. That's because the general rule is that TIFs can only be for 30 years. There's a new exception I'm going to talk about in a minute that the legislature has adopted. But for sake of this slide, a TIF can be up to 30 years long. You have the base value, what I previously called the original assessed value. So in this scenario, you've got a $1 million piece of assessed property, but you know your company's going to come in and put $5 million into that. So it's either a new building, investment in the building, that sort of thing. So you're ultimately going to have a $6 million assessed value on that piece of property. If you TIF that project or that area, you can shelter that new $5 million of the assessed value, and you will still collect taxes on those two categories, but they'll go to different places. So the taxes that you collect on the original assessed value of 1 million, it's going to go to your general fund like it always has. But the taxes that you assess on that additional $5 million, once the project is up and running, will then become what we call TIF revenues. So same tax rate, same mill rate, they're going to be called TIF revenues. So you're going to be treating them a little bit differently. At the end of the 30 years, the project will be theoretically worth the full 6 million still, maybe some appreciation or depreciation, depending on the project. And it's out of the TIF at that point, and everything goes to the general fund. There are some limits. So you're allowed to do this, but the legislature has said there's some limits to this tool. So first, at least 25% of the area you'd like to put in your TIF district must be blighted, need of rehabilitation, redevelopment, or conservation, or suitable for commercial or arts district uses. That's typically fairly easily satisfied. If it's a commercial project, for example, you could say sometimes the entire district may be eligible for that. There are acreage caps. So each individual TIF district cannot exceed 2% of your municipal acreage. And you can't have more than 5% of your municipal acreage in a TIF district altogether. And there are some exclusions, which Winthrop currently does not utilize, but there are exclusions for types of TIFs called downtown TIFs, transit-oriented TIFs, and community wind power TIFs. Those are allowed to be larger and outside of the acreage cap. There's also a value cap. The original assessed value, again, the value that you're freezing in time, cannot exceed 5% of the total municipal valuation in total. So all of your TIFs together cannot exceed 5% of your total municipal valuation. Again, there are some exclusions to that, including as the three I mentioned before, as well as a single taxpayer high valuation district. Think about a very large mill, for example. It's rarely used, but there are some exclusions. Again, the other limit is it can be no longer than 30 years. The legislature did just enact an extension last year of an additional 20 years, so up to 50. But that's only if that final 20 years uses at least 75% of those TIF revenues for affordable housing projects or transit-oriented development. So it was part of a package of legislation the legislature put into effect to incentivize certain housing projects and housing development projects. So I have not yet seen a municipality use this, but I've had a couple of municipalities ask me about it. But again, that's a fairly significant extension, but you're limited on how you can use your TIF revenues if you do take that final 20 years. I briefly talked about this already. There are two different types of TIFs, economic development TIFs, and affordable housing TIFs. There are also a couple sort of subcategories of TIFs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but a downtown TIF district is when a municipality would like to revitalize and redevelop its downtown area. And so you can spur economic development in that area by TIFing the entire downtown and then directing certain TIF revenues to projects like facade, upgrades and all kinds of other types of things that are allowed. Transit-oriented TIF, again, is another type of TIF district that the legislature has not allowed. It's excluded from the acreage caps. And this is, again, when you want to target development funds for transit-oriented systems. So bus systems, streetcars, light rail, and other systems, but transit generally. Finally, omnibus is not a word that shows up in the TIF statute, but what that means is that you can designate a TIF district an omnibus district, which means that you can have multiple what we call credit enhancement agreements with developers, not just one. So what I think about this is think about a business park. Municipality may have a business park with multiple lots, and you may want to have, there may be multiple developers and you want to incentivize development along the way. So you'll pre-approve yourself essentially to have multiple credit enhancement agreements. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on affordable housing TIF districts tonight, only because I don't think that's something that is directly in front of you. It's something I spend a lot of time with. It's a tool that a lot of municipalities do use. It's a type of TIF district that's specifically for affordable housing. That's defined on your screen. So housing that doesn't exceed 120% of the median income. There's some limits to that, but you see a lot of this TIF districts when because the Maine Housing has a affordable housing program. You may have heard of it, the low income tax credit program, which is one of the ways that affordable housing is funded. And as one of the requirements for that program, you get the developers, I should say, get points for having a TIF district in place and a credit enhancement agreement to incentivize it, showing the municipalities essentially assisting with that. So this is the big time of year right now. In fact, where towns and developers are getting these applications in for affordable housing TIF districts. So you're allowed to do this, but you have these TIF revenues, but then you're limited. They're sort of designated funds in some ways. They're not in your general fund, the TIF revenues on the increased assessed value. You can only spend those funds for particular reasons that are outlined in the statute. We call those approved project costs or authorized project costs. And you have to include those project costs in your development program. So think about the document you're adopting, your TIF you're adopting. You have to say how you're going to spend those funds. And they have to fall within these categories. So the first type of category is tier 1 or section A categories, which are projects inside the TIF district. So think about roads, infrastructure, real property that is literally within the district. So you may need to upgrade a road, may need to put in some sewer, water, things like that. Tier 2 projects, or B in the statute, are project costs that are outside that TIF district, but quote, directly related to or made necessary by the TIF district. Again, similar types of public facilities and improvements, thinking about sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, storm and sewer lines, those kinds of things that may be necessary, but it's not actually in that TIF district, but you're going to have to upgrade some systems to help for the development. And then finally, tier 3 or C costs, which is the largest category of costs. And those are costs that are anywhere in town that are related to economic development, but they're very specific. And the legislature does continue to add to these costs. So just to give you a sense of what those kind of costs could be, in addition to the infrastructure and those types of costs we've talked about, they've added costs related to skills development and job training, quality childcare facilities and adult care facilities, recognizing that those kinds of costs are necessary sometimes to support jobs, new and existing recreational trails that have the potential to promote economic development in town, transit services, fisheries and wildlife or marine resources projects, public safety, another very popular one, public safety facilities and operations. There are some limits on cost, but you can spend money on those. Fiber optic broadband expansions, affordable housing, and new this year is the central administrative office. So think about your town. You're not supposed to use the word town hall. for whatever reason, but it's the central administrative office. You can now use funds for that up to 15% of the full captured value. So there's a series of types of projects, and one of the things we look at when we work with the municipality when they're adopting or amending a TIF district is what kind of project cost you think you may want to spend those funds on. And again, you're projecting a bit because these can be, up to 30 years long. We go through amendments frequently to add project costs. So the purpose of the amendments often are just new needs have come up, and the town would like to add some additional pre-approved costs for their TIF revenues. Other types of costs are, I mentioned it in passing, credit enhancement agreements. And I think I have a specific slide on that, so I'm going to wait for a moment. That's when you have an agreement with a developer. You can use it to fund bonds that are paying for approved project costs, and you can set the TIF revenues aside to aggregate them over time. You don't need to spend them each year. These are some unauthorized project costs. You specifically, at least for DECD TIFs, cannot use funds for jails, recreation centers, athletic centers, swimming pools. Interestingly enough, affordable housing TIF districts, you can use TIF funds for things like athletic centers, recreation centers, and swimming pools, recognizing that you're adding people who may need those services. Okay, a credit enhancement agreement. Town of Winthrop has one with your TIF. So again, this is one of the approved project costs. One of the ways you can use your TIF revenues is to enter into an agreement with a developer, whereby the developer receives a property tax reimbursement from those TIF revenues. The idea behind this is that but for the assistance of the credit enhancement agreement, the development may not occur, and you may not get the enhanced tax revenues as a result of it. So it's a way to incentivize that development. I just did a sort of back of the envelope calculation the other day. There's about 400 active TIFs right now in Maine, and about 65% of those include at least one credit enhancement agreement. So more than half use this tool. And again, you have a lot of flexibility with these credit enhancement agreements. So you can give anything from 100% of the tax revenues back, I should say the TIF revenues, to 10%, anything in between. You can stagger them or step them down or up. And you can also have certain performance standards if you'd like to. So I'm aware of a few where, it's tied to, for example, percentage. The more development, if you're really looking for something to be developed, you can incentivize that development by having increased or enhanced payments. If, for example, a developer, meets a threshold of certain square footage of redevelopment, then maybe that kicks them into a higher reimbursement bracket. Things like that. There's creative ways to think about it. The key is you have to have it approved in your development program, that the council approves and that DECD ultimately will approve. And then you can enter into these with the developers on your own. This is sort of the final but sort of important one, which is, okay, so it's an economic development tool, but what's the benefit to the town other than, I should say, the potential new development? And the significant benefit to municipalities is what we call the tax shift benefit. So we've sheltered that. You may remember that slide where we've sheltered the new increased assessed value in your TIF district. So you have a plot of land, you adopt a district around it, and because development's coming, development comes, and your value in my hypo I did earlier went up $5 million. If you did not have a TIF district, your municipal valuation would also go up $5 million. In other words, what the state main revenue services would value your town. That has an impact on the town. So as the town's valuation goes up, then that impacts three categories that are relevant to the TIF: your state education subsidies, your county taxes, and your state revenue sharing subsidies. In short, as your value goes up, you receive less education subsidies. You pay a higher percentage of county taxes because that's based on the assessed values of the member communities. And you also get reduced state revenue sharing subsidies because, again, that's one of the factors for state revenue sharing is essentially the higher your value, the less the state gives you. This just summarizes essentially what I just said in terms of how these are divided. The general purpose aid for education is in some ways the more complicated calculation, but it sort of boils down to the higher the valuation, the more funds that need to be raised locally, meaning you get less from the state. Same thing with county taxes. As your valuation goes up, the town's share of the county's valuation goes up. And so you have a higher tax obligation. And then municipal revenue sharing is based on population, taxes raised, and state valuation. Slightly complicated, but again, to boil it down, the higher the state valuation, the less subsidy that will be available. So this is a somewhat significant benefit to putting land in a TIF if you know that some development's going to come to your community. You get the development, you maybe have incentivized that development by entering the TIF, but then you also shield that increased assessed value from the state assessor. The state's not going to see that, or they're not going to calculate it, I should say, include it. So you get this tax shift benefit. You don't lose the two funds or pay more taxes. Here's a slide that gives you an example. I like to use this. So this is if you do not adopt a TIF. These are outdated numbers, but it's because we haven't run them for the town for some time. But the last time you worked on this TIF, I'm going to talk about in a minute, was 2013. And under the 2013 application, you had a fairly high tax shift benefit, meaning but you would have lost 68 cents on every dollar that was adopted through those tax shifts I just discussed if you did not adopt the TIF. So you get 100, you get the full dollar by having the TIF. The only sort of distinction now is some of those revenues will be general fund, some of them will be called TIF revenues, but you'll get the full dollar and you won't lose it through those shifts that would have otherwise occurred. Finally, this is just a slide to sort of talk about how the process works if you were to move forward with a new TIF or amend your existing TIF. There's a required public hearing. That's really one of the few procedural requirements under the state law. You have to have a 10-day public notice before that public hearing. Then the town council will vote to adopt it. But what you're adopting is a development program. So again, it's a Word document that explains what you're trying to do with this TIF. It includes various required exhibits, including a map of the district and the projections of the TIF revenues, as well as those tax shift benefits I just showed. So you have to show that, the projections or estimates, but you have to show that in your application. After the approval then goes to the relevant agency, DECD in your case. We work with the agency throughout that process. The agency does not take a policy position, so they won't disapprove or push back on the policy reasons for adopting the TIF or the percentages that you'd like to capture or share with a developer. What they're going to review it for is to ensure that you meet the statutory criteria for both those acreage caps, the valuation caps, the approved projects, and the procedural requirements. That's what they're going to do. And there's often a little bit of back and forth where we work on what we call technical amendments to in response to their comments. And the council order allows the town manager to work on those technical amendments with us, so he doesn't have to come back to you if it's not substantive. So finally, I think it's my last slide, second to last slide. This is the one TIF that Winthrop has. So some communities have many TIFs. You have one. It's called this Commerce Center TIF. It was originally adopted in 2006. It was then amended in 2013. And as currently adopted, it's a 20-year TIF, so it will end in 2026. It captures 100% of that increased assessed value. So again, that value that was put into it after the 2006 approval, it's capturing that. You have certain approved town costs that are in your development program today, and those include staff time related to economic development and administration of the TIF. That's a somewhat standard. You can partially pay for salaries of town staff as it relates to economic development and administration. You also specifically called out the Mount Pisgah Trail, bicycle and walking paths, marketing costs, downtown and Main Street facade improvement fund. And then finally, you also have a credit enhancement agreement, which we reviewed with the developer of the land in that district. And it's graduated. So the first 1 to 10 years was 100% of those TIF revenues that were collected. Then you went down to 75% for years 11 through 15. And finally, in these final years, you're reimbursing 50% of that increased assessed value that's been captured for years 16 to 20. So that's what you have today. So this will expire in 2026. You have an additional 10 years that you can use if you'd like to have an amendment to continue on collecting, you could either enter into a new credit enhancement agreement. You can decide to retain all of it for the town's purposes if you'd like. There's all kinds of different ways you can do that. There's also that additional 20 years, which is much more limited. If you go beyond the 10 that you're allowed, you would have to limit your use of those funds. So the years 31 through 50, if you decide to go out that far, to 75% of that has to be affordable housing or transit oriented development. And then finally, I like to just note that, you know, some municipalities do decide to adopt TIF guidelines or an application process, a policy, if you will. Not every community has one and it's not required, but I find it can be somewhat useful. What are the kinds of things particularly it's useful if you're a community that's approached frequently for a credit enhancement agreement or TIF, and there are some communities that get approached quite frequently. So it's a way to kind of have a policy to kind of think through what are the things that this town wants to do and accomplish with a TIF district. How do you sort that through? Do you have some guidelines on, sometimes they'll have limitations on how high they can go with their credit enhancement agreement reimbursements, for example. But anyway, there's some examples out there that you could look at if you'd like to think about a TIF process, guideline process. And that's my general review. So I'm going to unshare my screen and happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the council?
Good. So, the current TIF that we have now, are there no performance standards in place? Or performance measures in place?
So there were some initial projects that were proposed, mainly the rehabilitation of the space for Main General. But beyond that, not really.
That's right. Yeah.
Bill, I have two quick questions for you.
Sure.
So if the council decided to pursue the affordable housing option as part of the extension, would that affordable housing necessarily have to be within the bounds of the TIF district?
Not necessarily. And the reason why I say that is, I would say no. I should say not necessarily. The answer is no. And that's because affordable housing projects are now allowed as that category 3 type of project that I mentioned, which are projects that are anywhere within your municipality. So those were added a few years ago. So that means that you can spend TIF revenues on affordable housing projects without having an affordable housing TIF. So they added that kind of project cost into these DCD kits. So you could even add affordable housing in the next 10 years as well. You're just not limited to, 75% of those funds for affordable housing.
And then my second question is in extending a TIF, and as you know, our TIF is essentially the Commerce Center campus.
Yeah.
If we wanted to extend that, could at the same time we amend the boundaries of that district? That is, could we go from it being simply the Commerce Center to maybe having a downtown TIF?
Yes, you could, but there's certain considerations you want to think about. One is the term. So sometimes you've got 10 years left in the standard TIF right now. And if you're thinking about some new development, you may want to consider a new TIF for that, because then you can take advantage of the full 30 years. Otherwise, you'll be limited to the 10 years you have left on this one if you amend it to add parcels. So that's one consideration. There may be reasons to maybe expand the boundaries of this a bit as it relates to the existing development. But I think if you're going to do a downtown, that it's probably better to do a standalone TIF, because then you can do the full 30-year and have it sort of, a separate, instead of project costs and things like that.
And one last question. So when you talked about the tax shift benefit, I know I'm fudging a bit here. There are 2 types of Aggies, or 3 types of Aggies, Jim, those who can do math and those who can't.
Yes.
So,
Step down.
so the tax shift benefit.
Yeah.
Does that expire when the TIF expires?
Yes.
Because your full valuation will go back into your municipal valuation. So in other words, on the year after when the TIF district expires, then the state assessor will then see all the captured value, if you will. They will include it in your valuation.
So in other
There's
words,
a little bit of a lag for those state processes to show up. So when you look at the way we do projections, it takes a couple of years, for example, for some of those to go into effect. So it takes a couple of years on the back end as well to catch up to your
So
assessment.
just having that tax shift benefit is a potential reason for extending the TIF.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's clearly one of the reasons. It's one of the real benefits depending on the community. That number, by the way, your number was fairly high. That depends on the town. You know, you have to put in the town's valuation and other factors. But yeah, that's one of the big benefits. It's also one of the reasons why the legislature has limited you to 5% of your original assessed value. Because in essence, it's a subsidy from the rest of the communities in the state. Because otherwise you would be, receiving less, for example, state education funding.
You might have answered the question, I just wanted clarification on it. Now, say this TIF expires, the current one, we could reapply for a 30-year new TIF with that, and the district is creating, to Anthony's point, I was thinking is creating Commerce Center and the downtown, expanding it that way, which would we get more length, which is 30 years versus just extending this for 10.
Yeah, you could do that. You could create a brand new district, if what I'm hearing you're saying at the end of this. Yeah.
But also putting the Commerce Center back into it because, or is there a time like we have to wait for that property back into a new district or new TIF?
No, there isn't a time limit. It'd be looked at as it really is a new district. And it's not what you're describing would be to me. You're adding different parcels. You may have a different reason for it.
Yeah.
You may include it in a downtown district, for example.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, you gotta make sure we let that one expire, and then we get the whole benefit of the 30-year with the new TIF, with including all that.
Well, you would, but do keep in mind that you're gonna lose that tax shift benefit.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you're gonna have a new baseline valuation.
Yes,
So
you will.
whereas the baseline valuation in 2006 was 400,000, now it's over 4 million. So instead of starting at 400,000, you're gonna be starting at 4 million plus.
That's right. That's right, Anthony. Yeah, that would be one of the downsides of doing it that way.
And the other thing with negotiating with these TIFs, the town can get something out of it too.
Yeah.
So we can get potentially, it doesn't have to be the same split as it was before. It can be
That's
any
right.
split we want. So there's opportunity to get some infrastructure projects related to that TIF district.
Kind of leads me. Question, I guess, if you could maybe give some examples of these values. Is there any way to put in performance or a period of time so you could say, now this is really poorly performing and not contributing? That, and then evaluate, or just give an example how that works.
With a TIF district, it's more of, you come up, it's more of a contract, so it's not really.
Can you put it in terms of like?
Yeah, but when you're talking about performance, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're talking about performance, they will build the project, they will do this and that. There's not really, when you're talking about performance, are you saying, well, X number of units have to be?
Say,
Did this get built? Did this get?
Well, yeah, that's in the contract. In order for them to get the TIF, they have to meet those basic criteria.
what's it?
And the thing with performance standards, I think you gotta be careful of that, depending on what it is, because when you're doing the housing, you're essentially the TIF contract, if you will, it's a contract pretty much between the municipality and the taxpayer. There's certain expectations outlined in that contract, and if you don't meet those expectations, performance standards, I don't think it really comes into that, does it?
Well, Phil,
It's more of a contract. This is what I'm gonna do. This is what you're gonna receive.
yeah, well, Phil and I, though, we talked about a credit enhancement agreements, a couple of options. One is based upon job creation, which I don't think makes a lot of sense for us necessarily. But the second would be, and if we're talking about.
If you're structuring them with that, yes.
Yeah, if we're talking about the Commerce Center itself, then you could have a credit enhancement agreement that incentivizes development by saying you will receive this amount of money depending upon how much space that you actually redevelop and put back
Right.
into either commercial or residential use. And I think in that regard, that would make a lot of sense, a lot of sense for the community, the town, the taxpayers.
But don't they have to outline that in the original TIF agreement that they're going to be doing? You can't just not specify that, I don't think. I think you have to say, I'm gonna develop X amount of space. The timing of that may be different, but you have to specify that, correct? You just can't, if you have a TIF district, you just can't say, I'm gonna, I may not develop all of it. You kind of have to, don't you? In order to receive those.
Yes, you would have to specify that in the development program you adopt, and then again, in the credit enhancement agreement, which I agree is a contract. So you would authorize a credit enhancement agreement. Again, we're talking about going forward because you already have that contract, quote unquote, through 2026. So this would be beyond 2026. You could have certain, percentages, and I'm just going to throw out hypotheticals, not real. But say you would have a, 50% reimbursement for the increased assessed value, but you could get an extra 10%, for example, if X square footage is developed above what is today. 20%, these numbers can change. In other words, you could increase it once they hit a certain threshold of development. And
Incentivize.
that would be an incentivized. And again, it's not a percentage, just to make one slight correction, what I heard. You're not agreeing to give them a certain amount of money. It's a percentage reimbursement on the actual taxes they paid. So it's also, that would go up if the assessed value goes up, right? So there is some already built-in, there's some built-in incentives. So if they put enough value in there, that the value goes up, then they're going to get up, more back. But yes, you can certainly do it. There's a couple examples that I know of do that exactly, where a community really wanted to make sure development was happening in a district, and to kind of give that kickstart was to say, we have these 10% increased, in the reimbursement if you hit these thresholds.
The timeline usually look like for developing a contract, since we're 1.5 years out from expiration rate, what does that community input look like? What does the development of it look like? I mean, is there a timeline set for that? That we have to meet before
Public
that
hearing, you have to have a public
Yeah.
hearing.
But I mean,
There's a public hearing. So the first step typically would be, is for us to run those tax shift benefits. So that's a formula we have. And so if you were thinking about moving forward with a potential amendment, we would run that, because that's a good piece of information to know. I don't know if it's still going to be 65% today, but then you're going to know what that benefit is to the community so that's part of your negotiation, right? And then it's a negotiation with that developer, which you can deputize your town manager or other people to start that process. You can also have those conversations in executive session. You're allowed to under the statute, the original conversations. Ultimately, anything will have to be voted on in public, so that you can discuss, what those potential benefits may be. And then there's a public hearing and public input process. So people can speak. And in fact, part of the application is we have to prove that you did the publication, but we also have to have a summary of what was said at that public hearing. So it's a little more detailed sometimes in some minutes. So we have to if people speak, we have to submit that to the ECD, what they said. So that's how it go. But it's good to get the information in front of you first, just like any negotiation. What kinds of development could go in there, or the developer's thinking about doing? Is it that's something the town wants? What kind of tax shift benefit will the town get if you continue this TIF? That's helpful information, because it also helps you think about how much you may be willing to share in that tax shift benefit through that reimbursement.
And so, Phil, how long does that entire process take? Like, if the council tonight said, yes, this is something we're looking at, we want you to explore and pursue.
Yep.
How long does the process as a whole take?
The process can actually go fairly quickly once you know the terms. We get every once in a while, we get especially it happens in an affordable housing context because of application deadlines. But I'd say, a month is the shortest, just because you got to get the timelines right in terms of council meetings, and the 10-day public notice requirement. I'd see more realistically, if you want to take your time, meet with the developer, or have public meetings 6 months or so, just to give yourself, you're not under a time crunch yet. You still have, year and a half or so.
the reason why looking at your
Yeah,
Right here basically with the timeline, but I was just wondering about maybe doing a public hearing before we start entering into negotiations or contracts, just to get some input from the community. I mean, you did mention the community, what does the community want? Just kind of getting that input before we start doing anything.
Yeah.
you could have a workshop on the concept, you know, and or not the formal hearing that's required, but prior hearings, certainly, you know, yeah.
I would like to have a meeting with the council and the developer as a group and see, you know, kind of toss around his ideas, what we're looking at, because he obviously plays a big part of it.
So he's here this evening, so which is good. So what we're really looking for tonight is just that sort of direction, is if this is something you're interested in pursuing, and if so, that might be a good first step. So Phil, if we wanted to have that conversation with the developer about sort of what his initial thoughts are for terms, and the council shared what their initial thoughts are, is that a conversation that can legally occur in executive session?
Yes, it can, yeah. You could also have the council could give you their, you know, interest in at least pursuing these discussions. And they could authorize you to have that initial meeting as well, or come back and having a meeting in executive session. That's something you could do, yeah.
My personal preference is that we would have that executive session so that you guys can weigh in on exactly what it is that you're looking for, so that I'm not out in the left field.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much, Bill, for giving that presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Right, we will go ahead and move on to item 135, consideration of awarding a contract in response to an application for bids for LED conversion, both interior and exterior fixtures in the town building, park and decorative lighting. And in response to that invitation for bids, we did receive 5. There have been 2 recommended. I know that we have some personnel in the audience. We have a representative here from Oberon. Yes. No, thank you.
Share screen there.
Oh, I gotta make this change.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Farha. I am the Director of Business Development at Oberon. We had submitted a proposal to the RFP to the town of Winthrop, and I believe in our recommendation, there have been a couple of points that have been missed with regards to our company and our proposal. So I would like to take a couple of moments of the town council's time to go over the proposal from Oberon's and in a little bit more detail to allow you to make a more informed decision. So if you break down a LED proposal, there are kind of like 3 main aspects that you consider. One is project cost, second is the quality of fixtures, and third is how much savings you're going to achieve from this. So let's go through them one by one. The first thing here is the project cost. We are competing for the bid against Affinity, so the numbers have been listed out. On the left-hand side, you see Oberon's numbers, and on the right-hand side, you see Affinity's numbers. Our project cost is $150,000. Affinity came in at $174,000. Efficiency meaning rebates. These are rebates allocated by the public, and our Oberon was able to secure $89,000 in rebates, whereas Affinity has been able to secure $47,693 in rebates, which is about double, and these rebates have already been pre-approved by the state, by Efficiency. Thirdly is 179B tax deductions. This is something that's exclusive to Oberon's proposal. This is a tax deduction that tax exempt entities can also avail. And I have provided a more detailed analysis of it in our proposal, but the amount comes out to about $14,000 that will be allocated to town of Winthrop. This brings out your net out of pocket to $46,950 through Oberon and about $126,546 through Affinity. And I'm sure the citizens of your town might be curious to know why you're recommending a proposal that's $80,000 more. So moving on to quality of fixtures and efficiency, which is a point that has been brought up in the recommendation. First of all, I would like to kind of give a breakdown of what is the governing body on the lighting fixtures. So there's a body called DLC. They are the authority over lighting fixtures. They kind of review and certify the products. Overall products are DLC premium certified. So in the DLC world, there are two certifications, DLC standard and DLC premium. Overall fixtures are DLC premium certified and included screenshots directly from DLC. What DLC premium gives you is a higher efficiency product. What that means is higher lumen output for the same wattage input. So for example, for the 4-foot linear ambient fixtures, Oberon's fixtures come with 170 lumen per watt, whereas Affinity's come in at 145 lumen per watt. Oberon is also a direct manufacturer of these fixtures. Our fixtures also come inbuilt with motion and daylight harvesting sensors. And we have completed over 3,500 projects across the Northeast over the past 10 years, and about 200 plus in the state of Maine. When you are questioning the quality of the product, Efficiency Maine is also tasked with the responsibility of allocating public funds. And if Oberon's quality is in question, Efficiency Maine would not have partnered with us to do over 200 projects across local businesses, and I've provided references of many large businesses where we have completed these projects. Lastly, I have not mentioned it here, but we have about a 4.9 star Google rating. You can look us up, and a majority of those reviews are from the local businesses in the state of Maine. So you can hear directly from other businesses. Lastly, the third point is savings calculations. How do you analyze savings in a lighting project? It's a pretty simple formula. It is annual dollar savings equals wattage reduction, which is current fixture wattage versus proposed fixture wattage, times hours of operation, times rate per kWh. We don't have the reduction in wattage directly from Affinity, so the next best thing we can do is compare kWh reduction. So it is wattage times hours of operation. As you can see, annual kWh reduction, excluding sensor savings, comes out to about 157,000 for Oberon and Affinity at 139,000. This is in about a 10% variance, and that variance is coming from hours of operation. There was also a point made regarding the ROI. The ROI is aggressive because, again, you're spending $80,000 less out of pocket from the get-go. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. What other towns have you folks done?
We have not done municipal, so last week we completed town Sanford. We have not done any projects as to the submission of this RFP. However, we have done over 200 local businesses in the state of Maine.
Okay, and I guess my question is, when you're looking at these figures, the rebates, are you folks proposing 89,000 and Affinity 47? What's the difference there, and what does that account for? Do you know?
I'm not sure why Affinity was not able to get a higher rebate, but our rebates are approved by the state of Maine. I've shared of rebate approvals with Anthony.
What equipment are you folks using that versus what they're proposing to use?
I am not.
Yeah, so we do have representatives from Affinity here, so, you know, I mean, I think it's appropriate for Oberon to talk about their proposal and then Affinity to talk about theirs.
So what equipment are you folks proposing to use?
We are proposing to use Oberon manufactured equipment. These are the equipment we have used over the past 10 years. And with those equipments and the wattage savings that our equipment is able to achieve for you, we're able to achieve about $90,000 in rebate, which is straight up double in comparison.
So you just completed the town Sanford?
Yes, we did.
And what did that include?
I believe that was the gym building. I'm not 100% sure, but we did gym building and one more building in the town Sanford.
And how long did that take? Okay, because I'm looking at the proposal here and it says 2 weeks to complete and install across all buildings, and we have about 7 or 8 buildings.
Right, so we are a full turnkey provider, so we have in-house team members. And we come equipped with our own lifters. We've been doing this for 10 years, so we know how to run projects and how to do them quickly. And based on the number of lights that we're looking to install, we are estimating about 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what type of, yes, after service, level of after service would, you be able to perform? And then what is your local or I guess closest, office?
Good questions. So we're offering a 7-year manufacturer's warranty. We have installed fixtures over the past 10 years and our annual maintenance call rate is less than 1%. We manufacture our own products, so we do QC every step of the way. And, I'm sorry, what was your
Where is like the closest,
Right.
either, someone you would use, but you said it's all in-house, so.
Yes, so we have the employees out of Old Orchard Beach and our headquarters is in Stoughton, Massachusetts.
What kind of technology, and we all know the world's going technologically advanced, what kind of technology is with these fixtures as far as controls and that sort of thing?
So they come inbuilt with 2 controls. One is a motion sensor and one is daylight harvesting. Motion sensor, as the word sounds, if there's motion, it'll turn up, turn down. It's controlled with a remote, like it control like basically the whole room with one remote. And you kind of set it to, all right, if there's no motion for about, 30 minutes, you can dim it down and you want to turn it entirely off. And like storage units, sometimes people forget to like turn the fixtures off, so you can like dim down or turn all the way off. Come right back up, so that's motion, and daylight harvesting is, it does not apply for a little room like this, but imagine if there's an office and there is a lot of light coming in through the windows, the lumen level will adjust accordingly. Moreover, our fixtures are also, you can change the color and the wattage, so it comes with a toggle, so someone, like imagine if I install this facility and then later down the line, you're like, no, this is too dim, I probably want to like bump up the wattage, you can just climb back up and it's a toggle and it'll help you increase the wattage.
Any other questions from the council?
No.
All right, thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you so much. Okay. Just do this. Oh, thank you so much.
We also have some representation from Infinity Main, is that correct? Okay, that's well. Anyone have some questions? Infinity?
Yes. Thank you. Hello, good evening. My name is Steve Lieber. I'm the founder and owner of Infinity LED. The last time that I was in front of you was just several years ago because we did the streetlight project here with all the network street lighting. We're based out of Dover, New Hampshire, where we have a UL manufacturing site. We are an actual manufacturer of lighting in the Washington Street Mill in Dover, New Hampshire. Our assembly team is US veterans. We did provide a 7-year warranty on our products that we built them and we know that they're better, and we provide a 7-year warranty. Affinity's reputation in the municipal space is unequaled in New England. We have over 150 municipal customers. In fact, just recently, we just finished the conversion in the last couple of weeks of Newry. We're about to start Reedfield. Between New Hampshire and Maine, we have over 150 municipal customers of K-12 schools, municipal buildings, street lighting across northern New England. Our project has been presented. The first piece, and you will notice in your binders, the first piece that we start with is investment grade audits of all your buildings. And you will note inside those folders that we've actually given you energy models that are with a team of auditors, we've gone into each of the buildings, we've audited space by space, taken down every single detail of the lighting, and then presented the products that we manufacture and produce in our facility. We are the only manufacturer of this presentation that actually manufactures our lights. And that is just a comparison of the product combinations that have been provided. Direct manufacturing appears to be misrepresented in this conversation.
We are a direct manufacturer with a facility where we actually build our lights, and you're all invited to come see where we build our lights. I believe that the products that are listed by our competitor are multi-listed in DLC by companies called Shenzhen Wisdom Light, Noon Light in Zhongshan, China, and Shenzhen XSY Light, which is from Shenzhen, China. So there's not a direct comparison to the products. We are presenting you smart lighting in most cases. The return on your investment is a 5-year payback, and that is across all of the municipal projects that we do. A 5-year return on your investment is an outstanding return on municipal spaces, just given that municipal hours of operation are pretty standard and they're not long commercial hours of operation. The total savings across the lifetime of these lights is over $500,000. We're projecting $25,000, actually almost $26,000 a year in savings, and that is conservative. That is based on your actual hours of operation, taking a look at your electric bills, and doing full energy calculations. In terms of the differences, I'm sure you have some question in terms of incentives. There is a little bit of a challenge with efficiency main, and there's one aspect. Yes, our competitors brought you more incentives. On a short-term basis, you're getting a larger incentive because the way efficiency main's quick tool, the way they have their qualified partners apply, efficiency main actually incents the lowest cost product. It's not about the highest performing product, it's about the lowest cost product. We have looked at the ambulance and Avesta Deco, the decorative lights on Main Street, the DPW, the park, the police department, the town office, and the transfer station. And yes, the cost of our project is $174,000, and with almost a $48,000 that has been confirmed for efficiency main. On a short-term basis, however, it has been presented because we can't represent what our competitor has represented. There is a higher incentive coming from them. In terms of the annual savings and efficiency, this is where we have to get a little bit into the mud. In review of electric bills to confirm and understand how our competitor can provide, we're very accurate, and we always meet our numbers in terms of savings. We have dozens and scores of municipalities that will attest to that fact, because we are in the municipal space. This is what our business is. I will say this: the savings that was presented by our competitor, as an example, for the Avesta Cook building was 50% more than you spent a year on electricity. So that is one area that you have to question. This is not, we're not to bring that up for debate. The other piece of at 145 lumens per watt, which is what we are officially on record today, is the highest efficiency that's available in the industry, with very few exceptions. And we are moving now into products, depends on the product, 160 or 170 lumens per watt. But I will say that the products in the proposal that were presented to you in our responses on the RFP, we presented you for the town hall, for example, linear fixtures to be installed at 145 lumens per watt. Our competitor presented you a 15-watt fixture at 1920 lumens, which actually is 128 lumens per watt, and it doesn't provide enough lumens to actually properly illuminate the space. Our product is built with actually almost 3,800 lumens, and then we have what's called a high-end trim during our programming to bring that down to an average of about 2,600 lumens. So we're very good at this. We know this is what we do all the time, every day, installing municipal projects. Another thing that I would like to mention is, in our proposal, most operating spaces where there is an office or a need for control, we do have smart lighting. Our lights are programmed, every fixture is programmed to have occupancy, a dynamic occupancy setting, which is set to optimize, depending on the occupancy of a space, to squeeze the sponge, so to speak, in the terms of reduction of energy, daylight harvesting, scene setting, and manual dimming up and down. And that manual dimming happens because we'll be installing electronic smart switches in all office spaces and all usable spaces throughout the town. And that is part of our proposal. I don't believe that we saw smart switches on our competitive proposal. Lastly, in the proposal, just as an example in this room, our intention is to come in and take spaces with suspended up-down type products in most of your offices, as I had mentioned to Anthony, and upgrade your office space to go from suspended up-downs, which really light the ceiling as much as it lights the room. It's old style, inefficient fluorescent type lighting fixtures. Like most municipalities, you have the history of lighting in a lot of your buildings. Our intention is to remove those and put troffers in, recessed troffers, similar to what you see here, but in 2x2 configurations in all of those offices to clean up the spaces. So it's really kind of a reconfiguration of the space to the most modern lighting configuration out there. For rooms like this, these lights will actually be 1x4 retrofit, so the space itself will look the same. Our competitor hasn't presented you any type of lighting solution to actually put in the same lighting. It's some type of a linear surface mounted as we see from the off-film. So as I mentioned to you, over the lifetime, which you're making a decision to put lights up for the next 20 years. We've had our street lights, I think, in town for about 4.5 years. The amount of lights that have needed any attention or service, we could probably count on one hand. As Anthony will tell you, during his tenure, I think we've had one call, and that response was within 24 hours, and we had a truck here in 72 hours. Often when we come in and do a service call on the exterior spaces, we often find that it's utility infrastructure versus the lights. But we built the lights, we service the lights right here in New England, and we are truly the manufacturer and not just multi-listing to put brand name on there. There are no other manufacturers in New England building lighting with a manufacturing facility in lighting. And we're very proud to put U.S. veterans to work who serve their country and do the assembly work for us. The team that will that will actually install the product is a Central Maine company that will be here. It's actually involved in your installation of your street lighting. The same folks that come and service your lighting here will be the ones also installing and servicing if there is a need in the future of the lighting for the future, for any future lighting that we install as well. So thank you for letting us come in to present this project, and we're looking forward to working with you.
Did you say you have a 17-year warranty, 17?
A 7-year.
Okay, so it's equal to 8%. Thank you.
Now, when you talk about service, you just mentioned the service response to lighting, is that part of the 7-year, or is there a different service agreement? I mean, as far as coming and servicing it for a timeline?
At any time, you're under warranty for 7 years, and that doesn't mean that the service ends at that time. We have a reputation that if there is an issue, and it's very few times, you can rely on, there's one phone call to make. There's no discussion about, and we find this often out there in the business where there are project management companies that represent themselves as manufacturers. We are the manufacturer of the product. We are the project manager of the project. We are the installers of the project. And when there is an issue, there is one phone call to make. If there's a product that needs service, it's serviced in our shop. And I think we've established that relationship with the town of Winthrop and quite frankly, about 20 communities throughout Kennebec Valley, which is a fairly significant market for our operation.
And you said you just completed Newbury?
We just completed, we're working on projects right now in Reedfield and Bethel and Skowhegan. Yes.
And how big was Newbury about? How many?
Newbury was, four buildings, yeah.
Okay, and about how long?
Small town.
How long did that take?
About a week and a half.
Oh,
It takes time for installation. We don't rush. It takes time for installation, for programming, for removal of hazardous waste, removal of trash. And the final walkthrough with our client to make sure that the product is, has been installed to your satisfaction.
So I just, with this, the 7-year warranty, like when you said we had some issues with the streetlights, was there a cost to the town at all, or just completely covered? Okay, I just want.
Thanks, a couple other questions came in mind, so. First is, what is the time frame of your project to complete this entire project? What's your time frame?
If you're talking in terms of total installation time,
Yeah,
the total installation time, as we calculate 600 fixtures, we're looking at somewhere between 2.5 and 3 weeks.
okay. And other question is, again, it's more related around the first question I had with the warranty, but what is the life expectancy of your warranty for 7 years? You know they're gonna last 7, but what is, have you been producing these X years? What is the life expectancy? We get 10, we get 15, we get 20?
This current product line, as we, as manufacturers, we are required to provide third-party lab certifications to DLC to get listed. As part of that third-party certification, we have to provide not only efficiency, but quality and safety as well.
Sure.
There's also a calculation that's done, that is through, Department of Energy, that's called a TM20 calculation. It's actually through Energy Star, which actually doesn't handle DLC, is sort of like the Energy Star of LED fixtures. But these calculations are designed to make manufacturers do testing to come up with theoretical lifetimes. Our lights are valued here with the theoretical lifetimes that everybody has to turn at 80,000 hours. That operating hours through this town is approximately 27 years old. So when we talk about the lifetime, we generally will say, you're making a decision about lights that are going to be up in the next 20. We kind of stop there and say the light should be up there for 20 years. The second thing, which is outside of those calculations, is because we operate at much higher efficiencies, and we high-end trim the lights, and the average high-end trim is 70, in some cases it's 60%. It depends on where is needed task lighting versus non-task lighting. And we do those calculations as we come through and trim. As we high-end trim those fixtures, we're also, which are already underdriven in terms of power. What we're doing is we're extending the life of them, because these are high-end trim fixtures that have been trimmed to work. It's like, coasting on the highway, taking your foot off the gas on the highway, so to speak. So they're actually not just putting out less energy, they're also working less hard. And the lifetime of LEDs is considered, as LEDs eventually deplete and begin to dim out. Now, that technology is very, very advanced today, but we don't run our lights at 100%, we trim them. And as a result, the lifetimes will likely be extended past the 27 years. But again, we don't want to represent that you're gonna have lights for 30 or 40 years up here. We might be spraying quantum dots on your ceiling in 15 years and saying that's the best thing you could ever do. Sure. But you certainly should expect that the lights that from us that are built will be up for the next 20 years.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Go ahead.
You mentioned you have fixtures that are manufactured here. What type of fixtures do you manufacture here?
We manufacture may I answer those questions?
Yes.
We manufacture troffers, linear, high bays, street lighting, exterior lighting, all done. Components are sourced from various areas. It's not all US components, because we can't buy a lot of those components. Chips come from Korea. We'll buy Seoul Semiconductor chips. Anything else?
So assembly is essentially done.
They are
but the
absolutely,
components-
they are assembled, bench tested, high pot tested, burn tested for 24 hours, and packed in our shop. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Pretty good.
Is it okay if I address a few of the points that you mentioned?
If you keep it short.
Yes, I will. Okay, I'll be very brief. So I understand that our competitor, he is manufacturing the fixtures here, but that's just confirmed. The components do come externally. We manufacture and we assemble the fixtures internationally to keep the cost effective. First point, wattage reduction in the Anabesico building. I showed you the simple formula, which was dollars saved equals wattage reduction times number of hours times rate per kWh. If you increase number of hours and if you increase rate per kWh, obviously the dollars saved will also go up. In the RFP, the hours of operation were not outlined. We go as per the Google listing, or when our auditor is walking through the facility, we ask them, hey, how many hours is the facility in use for? So we have outlined all of that in our proposal, and the mere reason why Anabesico savings are higher is not because of the wattage reduction, it is because we have accounted for higher number of hours used and higher rate per kWh, which can be adjusted, and whatever we have accounted for, we have taken that into consideration and provided in the RFP. In terms of lower quality, our fixtures, they go from 15 watts to 38 watts. I told you there's a toggle switch. So the brightness, you will have no issues. If there is an issue with brightness, we don't need to bring in new fixtures. There's a toggle that just needs to be switched. And in terms of lumen, I'm happy to provide you with a Lux report. And if you just look up our fixtures on DLT, which is the regulatory authority, they have also confirmed that it is 170 lumen per watt. Efficiency Main awarding more rebates. Efficiency Main does not award more rebates based on lower cost. They award rebates for fixtures that are cost effective, which is what fixtures are. And lastly, in terms of maintenance, we also offer a 7-year warranty, no cost to you if there are any issues. And I don't think that the building matters. Yes, they have done a lot of municipal buildings, but we have done equally, if not more, private buildings. The lighting and the maintenance call and the reviews from customers is what ultimately matters. And Efficiency Main, they are a third-party authority that we work with, and they have approved over 2 million fixtures. And feel free to reach out to them directly to see if any of our fixtures are failing or issues to local main businesses. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And just briefly, if I may. So if you've seen here tonight, Farha is really a strong advocate for her proposal. And I very much appreciate that. My recommendation is really based to a large extent on comfort. And that is that I know Affinity LED to be, as they've said, in the industry, in municipal circles. Oberon may be able to deliver on the promises within its proposal, but I feel certain that Affinity will, based upon their track record in other main communities. And they've provided excellent customer service, and they have done our streetlights. And I think there is some synergy to be had between having the same group that does our streetlights do the rest of our chain. So that's what my recommendation is based on. I'm a little cautious in this regard, knowing the amount of money that's to be spent, and I just want to make sure we get the best possible product and savings that we can count on. And I think that Affinity offers that.
Is to potentially get other alternative responses that are maybe better, that provide you a lesser out of pocket with the same quality, if not better, which is what Oberon is doing.
Yes, ma'am, and we always include in our RFPs this statement that the decision will be based on what this council feels presents the best value to the community.
Thank you very much. there a motion from the council? I'll move to approve the contract with Affinity LED for LED conversion service. So is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? All right, thank you. Thank you, Affinity King. Thank you very much for coming. Moving on to item 135, consideration of order 2024-05, ratifying the consultant budget overages.
So, our new finance director is here. He's happy to answer any questions that you may have. I told him this would be his big moment.
You expectation is low. Yeah.
So in short, the good news is that overall we were $237,000 under our expense budget. However, that figure is impacted by the fact that we did have some departmental overages, nearly more than $183,000. I tried my best to detail sort of what the highlights of those are. As I mentioned in the memo, overages are just a normal circumstance in budgeting, because when we work on and adopt a budget, we're never sure exactly what circumstances we'll face over the course of the year. So the council is required to ratify the overages, so we're recommending. Oh, yes.
We spoke about a couple things earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe Vic can answer this with the capital reserves transfers. Why is that account off by 16,000? I would assume that one would be one that would be right on the money.
So we did look into that, today, actually, all the invoice, and it was coded for that expense line, and it turned out to be drainage and cold repairs. And that does impact that reserve at the end.
Yeah, so Roy, think about this way. So the name of the account may be a little misleading. It's not transferring money from one account to another. That's actually an expense account. And so within that account, there are some sub accounts, one of which is the Public Works Capital Reserve. And so we spent more, in essence, we spent more on culverts by nearly 16,000 than we were anticipating whenever the budget was.
So this adds to the overage in Public Works, is that what you're saying? Because they already have their own expense up here. And it's
So-
already over by 15.
So yes, so yes, they are, but it's two different sort of categories. So when we presented you the information, we wanted to explain the Public Works overage. So the 16,000, it is related to Public Works. I mean, we did buy more culverts in order to affect some street projects this year than we were anticipating. So yes, they are all Public Works, but most of the rest of the Public Works deal with, other sorts of concerns that were budgeted in other line items. Does that make sense?
For example, though, what were the other overages for? You're talking about culverts, and I know it's storm damage, and that sort of thing, so.
So I'm not completely still comfortable with how you guys budget things, but my understanding, so that 16,189 came out of capital reserve transfer. My guess is when that was coded for that, it was considered this is a capital expense. It's not gonna be a yearly thing, so that's why that was taken. The other things and the other public works for repairs, and a lot of repairs, overages. What was the other?
Yeah, so the two main things that that were mentioned in the memo, Jim, was just summer road maintenance and vehicle repairs. And so Nick actually explained it much better than I did. Yeah, you're looking at the difference between a capital account versus an operating.
And that's how when I went through the expense report.
So basically, we spent $16,189.88 more on culverts. There was already a capital line in there for culverts.
Well,
You
for,
spent that much more.
well, there was a capital line in there for paving, and so the culverts were part of that paving line on them.
You do.
It went over by 16,000.
Fees for contract.
No, so all of these, all that $16,000 was to FW Webb, which is one of the providers of our culverts.
So. I guess I overlooked this earlier, but for our finance department. Your department. Now you know that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're over, we're 48, we said that was our payout. That's the reason. For consulting us, yes, thank you. Mr. Son.
One thing I didn't ask earlier is overlay. What exactly is overlay? What is that account and what is the $63,000? No, it's
We barely spent from that account. So as part of the setting of the tax rate each year, the mill rate, you have an overlay that is meant to help to reimburse the cost of tax abatements. So that you're not, it's a way of budgeting for that. You never know what that cost is going to be. The last 2 years, I've asked the assessor to set that as low as possible because I felt like we had a healthy fund balance. And so that was in setting the mill rate, that was the lowest rate that we could overlay that we could count.
I moved for departmental subject overage totaling $183,390. Favor? Moving on to item 136, discussion and consideration of the following budget matters for the fiscal year 2024, carrying forward $888,120 and accounts assigned fund balance for capital reserves, appropriating $100,000 from the undesignated fund for the payout of accrued compensated absences, assigning $1,041,792 from undesignated funds to the assigned fund balance for capital reserves.
So this is actually all good news because essentially we have nearly $2 million that we can sign for capital needs, which I guess was something we didn't fully discuss as part of the LED, but my recommendation would be that we the $126,000 in out-of-pocket cost for that project, that we fund those through this $2 million.
I move that we carry forward the $888,120 of the town's assigned fund balance for capital reserves. Yep.
One second, discussion.
So, Anthony, you listed a couple of projects were used last year. Where would we sit for some of these? And hope on that right now.
Yeah, so once we get those funds assigned, what I'm proposing is that we schedule a discussion with the council to present and the staff will talk about it first and come back to you with some proposals about how that money be divvied up on our capital reserves. No, so again, Nick had a better description of how we do this when he first looked at this. He said, "Oh, so what you're doing is you're appropriating it to this fund so that you can later appropriate it to other funds." Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, all in favor? The second?
Yeah, move to approve order 2024-07 appropriating $100,000 from the undesignated fund for the payout of accrued compensated absences.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor, thank you. And the last one.
Move that we approve order 2024-8, assigning $1,041,792 from the undesignated fund to the assigned fund balance for capital reserves.
All in favor? All Very thank you. All right, item 137, consideration of order to report down to agree, authorizing a write-off of tax balances of less than $10.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor, thank you. Item 138, discussion and consideration of update and amending chapter 5 of the town of Woodruff personnel policy. And as noted in the memorandum, the recommended changes include vacation accrual, sick leave bank, bereavement leave, and as well as reworking or adding sections that address earned paid leave for family that will be back and made to do paid family and that will be back. Or leave, military leave without pay, vision insurance and income protection.
I thought we were gonna limit this to 200.
Should pay everybody here, but yes, yeah.
So if they-
I think it's.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion to table in a second. All in favor to table? All in favor, thank you. All right. Item 139, consideration of MMA voting delegates credential form and designation of a voting representative.
So I'm going to be attending the MMA convention. I'd like to serve as your voting representative if you'd like, or if one of you would like to attend and fulfill that duty, you're welcome to.
I think you're fine to do that.
I have someone to watch the kids.
I move that we delegate Anthony Wilson to as our voting representative.
Second.
Do we need
And
to-
who's the other?
I'll be the alternative because I'm gonna be going, I think so.
Yeah.
All in favor? All in favor, thank you. Item 140, consideration of the governance.
Move to approve the disbursement warrants.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor, thank you. Item 141, consideration of approval of the minutes of the August 5th and August 19th, 2024 council meetings.
So moved.
All in favor? This is item 142, consideration of recommendations from the.
One committee.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to other business. Is there any public comments from the audience? Anyone on Zoom? Comment from the council.
Just gonna put this in public record that, so I've been paying attention to school board meetings and just wanted to make a mention. You know, there's a lot of concern in the community over the potential waste spending and having to hire a new superintendent over the previous superintendent's time in November, and then also the additional costs that ended up satisfying. We really have concerns over the leadership of the school board and their functioning. So I'm saying that I'm gonna keep tabs on how that goes, and maybe in the future, we might have to have a little bit more collaborative relationship moving forward, so they understand we work very hard, making sure that our budget process was streamlined, was very, very
Where are they?
in line with what we want to do, keeping mill rates achievable below, any increases below 5%. I don't quite get the feeling that they quite understand some of their decisions and how that impacts. So I think that's just something that we need to probably have them at least talk to us or make us know what their plans are, so we have some idea that this has.
You'd like an update from the school?
I would very much.
So by that, you want me to invite the school board president to attend the next meeting and have that as an agenda item?
Yeah, it may.
Oh, okay, certainly.
Anyone that you know of when moving forward as far as the school year goes?
Yeah, and then kind of know if they have an idea of how their finances are gonna be impacted with the additional costs.
Lovely.
James?
Yeah, I'm sure Anthony's gonna get to it, but I just wanted to make sure you could, has speak towards his, answer report for, property updates, or. Where we have some of the ones kicking around, so left around,
Oh, okay.
that one, and the other thing is it's being makes similar to that, there, no comment, but, I tabled, topic for myself, that we were talking about, compensation. Yes, yeah, I'd like to get that back, Jen, please. Thank you.
No, town manager's report.
So I'll keep this very short. So I see Mike Ketchens in the audience, and it reminded me that we have received our $50,000 check from the Community Resilience Program for the projects involving the heat pumps. And so that's already put to good use. We're done with the fire station. And in fact, had a call today from someone that's affiliated with that program. They're going to come in and do a final walkthrough of that project. And so working on the ambulance station now.
What days you made?
We'll talk about that offline. So, so anyway, so that is, we're making progress as far as that goes. Just a couple of things that we will have on the next agenda, other than what we talked about here this evening, is the organizers of the Heritage Day will come and give a debriefing of how that event went and what they plan on doing moving forward. And it will also be the annual approval of the new general assistance maximums, which we do every year to amend our general assistance plan. So just know that that'll be coming. And then I was asked to present an update on Rambler Road. So it has been, as you know, paved, striped. And as far as I know, our police chief has left the room, but the traffic there has been fine. We set up the little speed thing for people. We're installing new signage with all the new speed limits. And so still looking at whether or not we're going to do speed humps there or not. There's been a suggestion that we do that. It has its pros and cons. The pros would be that it is definitely going to slow some people down. The cons is that you would have to remove them during plowing season, and thus, you know, that's the bulk of the school year is when there's a possibility that we may have some snow on the ground at some point. So anyway, but we'll be reassessing that as we go forward. And that's all that I had to offer this evening.
Thank you very much. So at this time, we will move into the executive session for one MRSA 4056A for personnel matters. Thank you to all of those on Zoom and the trials.